I'm going to talk to you about the only case in my entire legal career I have ever cried about. My name is Marco Brown. I'm a divorce attorney in Salt Lake City. And to give you a little bit of context for this story, I got to tell you a little bit about my family. So I'm married to an extraordinarily nice woman named Demery, and we have never been able to have biological kids. And that was really painful in the beginning. Infertility is not super easy on an emotional or spiritual level. So we could never have kids, and we decided after we'd been married a few years that we were going to adopt. So we went through that process. We were in a high-risk adoption placement, and we were there for the birth. We were there for our son's birth. Happens about 2 o'clock in the morning. It's a big thing. But anyway, he gets born about 2 o'clock. I feed him his first bottle that I fed him about 8 o'clock that next morning, and I bond with him immediately. I love this kid. I'm totally his dad. I just feel that immediate bond as if my wife had given birth to him. And then about 12 hours after that, mom changed her mind. Biological mom changed her mind. And I can't fault her for it. I do the same thing, right? You get this beautiful little baby, you'd plan this adoption, but you get him and you're like, I don't want to give him up. So it was okay, but it devastated me emotionally. And I remember my wife and I went back to the hotel room that we were staying in. This is in St. Louis. And I cried like a little child on my wife's shoulder. I just sobbed, and I'm getting emotional thinking about it right now. I just sobbed because I was losing my boy. And it was one of the most terrible feelings I've ever had in my entire life. We drove back, we stayed there the night, and we drove back the next morning. We were living in Nebraska at the time. So we're driving back to Nebraska. We don't say like 10 words to each other on the drive home. It's like 6 hours because we're just both emotionally devastated. And what do you say, right? We didn't have any idea what to say. So that was a Sunday. We got back. I had to go to work the next morning, and I worked 4 hours away in Iowa. And I would stay in Iowa 4 days a week, and then I would come home on the weekends. So I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and drive to Iowa so I could make it to work by 8:30, and then I'd stay there for 4 days. And it was terrible because I was going to be alone the entire time. I just had an apartment in Iowa, and it was just me. So I was going to be alone with my thoughts for the next 4 days about what happened. I was not looking forward to that. But, made it work. Get to Wednesday, and the social worker calls, says, "Hey, are you still interested in Elliot?" Because we had named him as well, our son. And I said, "Yeah, of course we are. What's going on?" He said that mom changed her mind again. And I said, "Okay, yeah, we're totally on board." And then there's a bit more to the story, but about 2 weeks later, we go and we pick him up. She's terminated her parental rights. We go and we pick him up, and then we're his parents, and his parents are his sons. And he's a beautiful, beautiful kid, and I absolutely adore him. So that's kind of the backstory to the only case I've ever cried about. Doing adoptions at that point, didn't really do that many adoptions, but wanted to help out adopted families, so we're doing this adoption. And in Utah, adoption is pretty permissive. We're really an adoption-friendly state, but there are some very specific things you have to do in the law in order to effectuate an adoption. But some of the things in the law are mandatory, and some of them are permissive. Okay, so you have to do some, and then some you don't actually have to do. So we had put together the paperwork, but we forgot to put in this permissive portion of the law. So it wasn't actually necessary, and we just forgot to put it in there. Totally our bad. So we get to the hearing, and the judge comes out, and what the judge had done, you have to wait a certain amount of time in order to finalize. So what the judge had done, he had set it for like a week before the number of days have to pass in order to finalize. But we didn't think anything of it because he's the judge and he can do what he wants. So we get there, and the first thing the judge says is, "Well, I looked at this morning, and it looks like I set this too early, so we're not actually going to finalize today." I thought, oh, this is not going to go well, because I'm sitting there with my clients. And then he also says, "And you forgot to put this portion of the statute in the paperwork." And I said, "Well, Your Honor, we don't actually have to put that portion of the statute in the paperwork. It's permissive." And he said, "Well, I want it in there. It's mandatory for me." And of course, he'd never said anything like this. So this was a complete crap show, okay? And it was that sort of thing where I just had to follow my sword. It was really kind of the judge's fault. I did forget one portion of it, and it was permissive. But anyway, we get outside and my clients just lay into me, and rightfully so. They're going through the exact same emotions I went through when I was going through adoption. They were scared, they were angry, they were upset, they thought the baby might be taken away from them. It was absolutely terrible, and they're yelling at me, and I'm just taking it because it's, ultimately I'm the attorney and it's my fault. But at the same time, I'm feeling all of that flood of emotions I had when we were adopting our son Elliot. It was really, really tough, but I have to kind of keep it together there in the courthouse. I get home and write an email to my clients and say, hey, look, absolutely, you're upset. I messed up. So I'm going to give you your money back and we'll get this thing finalized for you. It'll be okay. I get through sending that email. My wife walks in the door and I went and I cried on her shoulder again as if we had just lost Elliot. And I knew in that moment that I should not be doing adoptions. That's one of the lessons I learned, because it was just too emotional. It was like too close to my heart. And if I can't be objective about a case, then I'm not doing anybody any favors, right? So we actually don't really do adoptions anymore. We just focus on divorce. And a lot of it is because of my emotional inability to do this. So there was that. And it was just a huge flood. Like I said, I cried as if we had just lost my son again. And that's it. That's the only case that I've ever cried over in my entire career. And thankfully we learned some things from that.